Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 2 of Hellbound. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're immediately picking up where last episode left off, and Jungja talks about the fact is that, yes, she is getting something out of this deal. They are going to be paying her 3 billion won for the live broadcast, and she knew she needed to talk to somebody, like a lawyer in particular, to be able to get this done, you know? And obviously, like, everyone in the room, including Hyejin, like, kind of looks at it as, like, a hoax, like, oh, you can't really believe this. But for her, it's like, okay, if nothing happens, cool, I can get the money, hopefully. But if it does happen, like, how can I make sure that this goes to my children? And so, like, one of her associates, she walks out in the hall with him, you know, and even brings that up. Because he's thinking, like, nothing's going to happen. But she's like, what if something does? You know, either way, we got to protect the children. The point is to make it so that the children's names aren't out there in the public. Got to protect their identities in this situation. So, they end up having a sit down with Jinsu. So, Kyung-hoon and his partner are there along with Jinsu, who's brought his own like lawyer or representative to kind of talk about this particular situation. So the thing is he makes a snide joke about like, oh, like if nothing does happen, does that if the broadcast does get canceled, that does mean that do we get a discount or something? He's laughing, and it's just like this ain't a laughing matter. He's like, sorry, it's just like I just, you know, I'm just making a joke because I've never been. It's like, I guess he's trying to justify, but like, I'm just kind of awkward. I've never been in this position, so I'm making a half-hearted joke. But I'm like, dang, you're talking about someone's life, and he's just so casual about it, you know. And it's like, then he sees her children and is like, okay, cool. Your kids, your son is 13, your daughter's 6. That's an interesting age gap. What about the fathers? And she's like, oh, I'm a single mom. He's like, oh, so could a question be like, oh, why aren't the fathers in the picture? And he starts throwing out accusations like, oh, could it be that you're a husband, that you were basically with men that were married? And that's like, you know. And that's, you know, and it's like kind of pinning at like, oh, maybe adultery is her crime. And obviously the son is overhearing and he jumps out the room and he like starts yelling at Jinsu because it's like, shut up. Like, how dare you accuse my mom, talking about she deserved this? Because the reason why he's asking these questions, because he's trying to fill out the doctrine. Because as Yunpo kind of brought out last episode, there are holes in their doctrine. They don't know the ins and outs of this. Jinsu's like, the more information I get about like, cool, what crime did you commit? What sin did you commit to make it so that you're going to go to hell for it? So that's what he's so curious about. And he was kind of smirking a little bit when the son came out the room yelling out like that. And it's just like, the fact is you're agitating the situation because he wanted to talk to the kids. But even, because Kyung-hoon's partner was like, do you want to talk to the kids? And he was like, no, I don't want to. Like, they've already kind of got their own situation. The last thing I need to do is be dragging someone's kids into this, because she doesn't want them a part of this. And she's even Jeongja is like, if you want to think whatever you want to think of me, Mr. Jung, it's just like, don't, like, I just want to have enough money to make sure it gets sent to my kids. That's like all I care about, you know? And that's what it was. It was just supposed to be a meeting for like the lawyers to kind of iron out the contract to make sure everything's okay. And obviously not, you know, it's still a concern and conversation about will something actually happen, because it's only like a couple of days away now. So, but once again, the point was to keep her identity secret. But Jinsu talks about the fact is that the world is moving, a new world is beginning, and he's basically like, I'll see you there. Because like the laws of man can only apply so far. They only go so far. Now we're not even talking about the laws of men anymore. We're talking about the laws of God himself. It's kind of, this is his will and he's enacting this. So, but there's quite a few wrinkles that present themselves over the course of this. One, Jungja and her entire family, her son and daughter, were blasted because Conformist 38 ends up blasting them on, what do you call him? I think it's naming the subtitle is like Skull Mask. I think it's just what we refer to him as. Like that dude, on his live stream, information was put out there, so she was doxxed because they were keeping it all top secret. But now, like, they knew a new person had been chosen in Seoul, Korea, but they didn't know who exactly, and now they did. And now the thing is like, oh, what did she do? And then it's like, oh, potentially having like, two different fathers for your children. Like, what happened to him? Did she kill them? Is she a murderer? And then it's like, oh, here's a picture of her son. Oh, he's got a bruise. She's abusing them, isn't he? It's like, that's the thing. It's spinning way out of control because you went from she's a murderer to she's an abuser, child abuser. Like, you don't know, but it's like that doesn't matter when like the fervor of a fanatic cult like this is, you know, spun up like that. You don't need facts. All you need is just like someone just, you know, you giving people someone, you give them the hot button things to be angry at, and you just give them a target to kind of lash out at. And so people are just thinking the worst. And now because her family's name and stuff is out there, Hyejin and Kyung-hoon end up having to like get the kid. Their plans were like, if things go down, to get the kids out of America, like getting them like settled with someone in Canada, like an associate of hers for a little bit. And they kind of had to move quickly because like the mob mentality, if we don't get them out of town soon, because especially because Skullmask dude was all about like, oh, we got to find those children. They're the only ones that can confirm what she did and make her confess, like, you know, the son, like basically get him to corroborate that, oh, his mom's an abuser and stuff like that. And so luckily nothing happened, but that's also the thing of like, you see people looking that way and it's like, you don't know who could be a part of this. I mean, like, it looks like regular people are all about this, the new truth and everything. So like, it can range from anywhere between teenagers to full grown adults. So it's like, you don't know, like anytime someone's kind of looking their way, especially even adults, I'm like, is that person like, are they going to say something? Because nobody knows. Because even at one point on the escalator, the son is looking and he sees someone look at him and it's like, is that someone who, because this ain't just like some small things. It's grown to such a monstrous scale that it's such a like big fervorous moment that like even regular people are going to come across it. Like the people we see throughout the episode, like who are looking at it, it's like some of them are like, oh man, this guy is crazy, this guy's weird, but it's like we don't know how many of those people are all about it and how many of those people are just being like, you know, it's that mentality of like jumping on the bandwagon or something. Like whether you believe it or not, it's like, oh, I'm about to experience something crazy, this phenomena, I'm going to see it firsthand. Like that's what it is for some people. Some people who are just sucked up in the craze of it because they do believe it. And even the non-believers are swept up in it because it's such a mainstream thing now. So that's what, you know. So like you can't tell, like, so anyone could be a part of this, even if they're not part of the new truth, they could still be tangentially connected because there's someone that's like, oh, I'm an onlooker and I'm curious, you know? So like I said, they were luckily able to get the children on a plane, but obviously Junja, like, she's so upset because she's like, I didn't even give them a proper goodbye. I wish I would have hugged them one last time. And even the son, because he's the one that his mom is like, you're in charge, you're gonna have to be like, fill that role for your sister of being kind of the parent in this situation. He's still only 13 himself, but he has to play that role because like, you know, at the very least you have the money, like, you know, whether you, even if you convert it to dollars, which I could be wrong with the how much that is, but I would assume that's like, I don't know if like it's either, I mean, I think it's like 30 million. If I'm correct, I could be mistaken, but I believe it's like 30. I believe that would be like 30 million, maybe, US dollars. But either way, like that's a lot of money to be like, you know, it's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money that could change and take care of them for the rest of their lives. But the son, like he sees a woman and her child on the plane, and it just makes him think about his mom, and he got panicky because he couldn't find his sister, but he found her and had her sit down, and he starts crying because he, you know, once again, he's a child in this too. Like he's not an adult taking care of his little sister. He's a child himself taking care of another child, and knowing, because she's like, his sister's asking like, oh, when will we see mom again? And it's like, he knows about the new true stuff. He's the one that actually filled her in on, so he knows that she's going to die, that this was their last time, and he, you know, he can't really explain that to his sister yet, you know. And it's a hard thing for him to kind of have to juggle. But luckily, like I said, nothing happened. And I would have expected something to have happened on their way there. But still, I mean, it does happen at the police station later on because Kyung-hoon and all the others, like police at that time, like all got attacked because a whole bunch of, whether they're part of Arrowhead or New Truth, which once again, they seem parallel to each other, that there are people from Arrowhead in New Truth. That was the whole point they were bringing up last episode. But whatever the case may be, they busted, like, to how brazen it, to just bust up into the police department and just like start attacking them because it's like, oh, let our fellow members go. Like, it's like, how'd you think this was going to go, you little punks? Like, that's the thing. It's so caught up in this fervor. Like, we're seeing it little by little, just like how monstrous this situation has become. even to the point it's hitting a lot closer to home than even Kyung-hoon realizes, because Jinsu brings in Hyung, his daughter, and it turns out she blames herself for what happened to her mom, because she was supposed to drop off a bag full of like her dad's clothes to change into. Well, she got distracted by a puppy in a window, and she got home, and her mom's like, no, I'll deliver it. And it's like, because I did that, he ended up killing my mom. And she blames herself. It's like, if I hadn't forgotten to do it, like, I could have dropped it off to dad's and then been back. And, it's just the timing of, she just blames herself. She's been internalizing that, because that's even a conversation Kyung-hoon was having with someone. I want to say it was like it might have even been this episode, maybe last episode, about like whether or not, like, oh, how is Hyung about all of this? And it's like, well, I don't know. She doesn't really talk, so I don't really know how she's feeling. And it's like, she's been carrying this guilt, because we do see that she's a little girl at the time. So it has been a couple years since her mom died. To be fair, I'm such an idiot for not realizing, like, of course it's been a couple years, because the guy got released, he was in jail for 6 years. So of course that was a long, but I guess like I think I was at the time more so talking about like how long it's been since he's been released. Like, is that still a fresh enough wound? So that should have been an obviously clarification for me, but still, like, that particular regard of it, like, how long has it been since he's been released? But Jinsu ends up taking her to the guy, and it's like, oh, look at him, man-made punishment. He was able to be released. And then once again, their justification for it is because he was a drug addict. And it turns out his time in jail was like at a medical treatment facility, I guess, to get clean or something, or, like it's essentially the equivalency of being locked in a psychiatric facility because you were deemed insane, like in court and stuff like that. So it's kind of the equivalency of that. But Jinsu was like, are you sure about this? I was like, Hyung, don't do this. Please don't do this. And she tases the guy. I was like, oh, you didn't kill him. But it turns out, right, Jinsu is like, right, people need proof. Rather than believing things with their own eyes, sometimes they need proof. And it didn't even correlate in my head when they killed the guy. Like, she was seeming like she had some reservations, because, like, she's not directly involved. She's still a part of it. She's not the one that did a lot of the heavy lifting in this regard. All she did was tase him. Jinsu's the one that chloroformed him and then proceeded to cremate him. And it's just like, Jesus. And he was like, it's not like he was dead. He was knocked out for a bit, but he immediately snaps out the moment his flesh starts burning. And she's smiling, because it's like, yes, justice. This is justice. Like, what the justice system couldn't do, I got revenge. This is what, because it alleviates some of that guilt I think she felt by actually being justice. Because even Jinsu touched on it. It's like, this man gets to live his life. He doesn't look like he's guilt ridden. Once again, you're getting like a picture of someone's life. Like, maybe he doesn't seem too guilt ridden, but you don't know, like, you're just seeing this one moment in his life. That doesn't mean he doesn't feel guilty about what he's at, because we still don't know. They said just drugs and stuff like that. Was that all there was to it? But regardless, it's like, I don't think any, like, trying to talk her out of it would have worked, because she had this smooth talking SOB of Jinsu talking to her, being like, right, this is the right thing to do, especially what it does in the grand scheme of things, the cause that it adds the fervor behind. Because at first I thought you're just killing the guy. I was like, wow. And then when, like, we cut to the scene later of them, like, oh, the body was like, that's what you're talking about, proof. You want it, once again, he doesn't have much proof. That's why the Jungja thing means so much, live broadcasting that, because once it just adds more fuel to the fire that is the new truth, and adds more legitimacy to their beliefs and stuff like that. So he just added this. It's like, it's two birds with one stone. Heejun, you get your revenge, but also at the same time you get to propel us forward, because we all know this to be the truth, but now we added once again another more fervor behind it. But because that's definitely going to be interesting, because I don't think that's going to go under the radar, because I think eventually the truth will come out about this particular situation. But that's what I was talking about exactly last episode. He only had the 2 videos of them doing this, and then he just brings up, oh, here are crimes from other places in the world that this happened to. So it is a situation of he's perpetuating certain, because that also adds, like, now in retrospect, it's like, Yeah, the first video seems true. Obviously, we were there to witness everything in the first episode of that guy being chased and beaten down and killed. But like every other victim, like we didn't see them attack him. We just saw the aftermath, and that adds more fuel to it when they just like, oh, we don't know what happened. We just assume these creatures attacked him because the state of the body matches. And obviously, Ki Young Hun ends up seeing it for himself, like when it's plastered all over the news. It's like, right, no one called the police. The reporters was the first one on the scene because Jinsu needed it that way. But essentially, as he's Ki Young Hun doesn't seem to. It's not like he was thrilled about it, because I guess it's like this is like opening ripping that Band-Aid off all over again. It was reopening that wound, because I guess that's why he was checking in on his daughter even more so later on. He was trying to call her, but he kept getting her voicemail, because I guess after that she kind of feels guilty, especially her dad being a cop. Like she feels even more guilt. But maybe Jinsu kind of convinced her not to talk to her dad. Just right, you did this not only for your dad but for yourself. But maybe there is some she got some enjoyment out of it, and now she's riddled with guilt. Once again, the doctrine probably cuts around that by being it's not, once again, punishing the sinners. That's not a bad thing. You're doing what God wants us to instill that, because once again, us making a pup. You think she'd feel a certain way of aren't we lying to people? But it's no, this is what's happening. We're just adding more fuel to it. We're reminding people to be good, because he told her we're going to make a world where people are just, where people are good and are without sin. And I'm once again, it's who made you because he feels like he's probably preordained of oh no, this I was chosen because I found them, just when I was giving up on life, I found this new purpose. So he feels like he's probably chosen. That's why he feels like he has to be the end all be all, why this is on him. This is his journey, his task, his purpose in life to do this, to spread the word. And because maybe we still haven't gone into the ins and outs of his past, but maybe there's some stuff where people were terrible, and for him, knowing no, people get what's theirs, essentially. You sin, but it's but once again, it comes, and that's what he's trying to discover is how severe does the sin have to be? Because apparently Junja might be potentially dying because of an adultery. Granted, you ask Skull Mask and he'd be oh, it's because she's an abuser. Oh, because she murdered the father of her the different fathers of her children, so that's the problem of not actually knowing that you're able to kind of create whatever narrative you want to. Because even his chief, Ki Young Hun's chief was did you do this? He was no, I was with Hyejin and Miss Park, and making sure her children got on a plane, so I couldn't have done this. So that's that's even sad that even your chief had to ask you whether or not you had anything to do with that. But even telling him to stay away from it, because it's because they in the episode they did try to get DNA evidence from the body from episode 1, but they couldn't, and it's it doesn't register as human. And the chief being well, what the hell was it then? And they're just So that's why he's not too quick. He's yeah, we probably won't find anything organic anyway. But he has, Keon has someone send him over stuff about the body. So I think they will find, I don't know if they were necessarily wearing gloves. There might be some evidence, some fibers, some evidence. Maybe it got burned up. But to be fair, it's they had to touch his body, because it didn't seem like they were wearing gloves either. I guess they weren't expecting anyone to actually look into it too much. So maybe they weren't, but obviously I think this is all going to lead Ki Young Hun back to his daughter eventually. Maybe there's some evidence tying to it, or just some evidence proving that it isn't a one-for-one. What happened to his body. Maybe the burns are similar, but there's a difference between what the executioners do to a body versus... But maybe it's just that Jinsu has studied it enough to know that it replicates it enough that most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference, But maybe under heavier scrutiny, you can see the difference. We'll have to wait and see where things kind of go from there, but obviously they've made a whole thing out of it, because now they want... Jeongja to confess her sins. There's people outside confess your sins, do what God wants you to, confess your sins. People like surrounding her house. Like, you got people on top of rooftops looking at this all go down. We even had VIPs who have special seats, because they'd asked Jinsu, like, how the hell could he afford like the 3 billion won they're planning on giving to her? It's because members of that of New Truth are pretty wealthy, and those VIPs is like, right, so those people who bought front row seats, like, those are the type of people who, and they made sure to cover their faces too. The fact that she's got this giant hole in her wall, because they, you know, it's on public display, because even they were disappointed to find out, but all the media outlets are going to be running this, because Hyejin's partner was saying, like, oh, like, there's no way they're actually going to, like, no media will company will be crazy enough to air this. It's like, no, all of them are airing it, because I guess New Truth has that type of backing and influence, because we don't know who their VIPs are. The VIPs could be like people who own said network, so they can get the media coverage that they want, or just, like, once again, just powerful people and connections that you have could lead to that, whatever the case may be. But she's meant to sit there and display. Obviously, the detectives are there and being like, if she's being threatened or whatever the case may be, we're going to go in, you know, I think even said, like, one point, like, take the safeties off, we're locking and loading, like, we're going to jump at this however way we can. Even Hyejin tried to ask her, did she want to see her children, but she's like, not now. She's like, when it's all over, I will, because she's hoping that it won't be, like, she's hoping and praying, but there's still a part of her that feels guilty enough of, like, yeah, this is going to happen, I know it is. But there were even people just out a ton, like almost everyone there out in the streets celebrating, because I guess because of the news that it was going to be covered, or at least I guess at the very least that it was, the clock was counting down, so maybe that's why they got even more excited, whatever the case may be. Before we even get to the actual thing going down, the episode cuts, so we're going to start there at the top of the next episode, I can only assume, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but also probably the most important thing, well, sadly the most important thing is going to be the aftermath of what this does to New Truth, what this does to the public. Like, things are already in a tailspin now. Things are going to get even worse once this, like, literally goes super, like, mass media coverage public. Then it's going to be a whole other beast. It was already kind of a hard beast to contain. It's going to be nearly impossible to contain it all going forward, especially with such rabid people, with the whole Arrowhead just adding more and more fuel to the fire, and Jitsu not doing anything about it because he wants people in the fervor, because the more fear that's out there, the better people will be. So once again, he's on some Light Yagami thing of like, oh yeah, like, Light's just straight up killing people, and he's willing to do it too, but it's all for the purpose of instilling fear so that people would never commit crimes. I don't know if Light ever really, I don't know if it's ever said that in a manga or even in the anime, whether or not that he, by killing bad people, he's perpetuating, like, oh, people are definitely going to be good. Like, I don't know if he ever got that far. It's just like, I'm going to punish those who slip through the cracks. Like, I'm cleaning this world of all the disgust and terrible people, you know? I don't think Light ever went into the nitty gritty of like, oh, like, by doing this, I'm preventing people from ever doing it. It's like, no, he was just on his God complex type of thing. So, but once again, I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw between Jinsu and Light Yagami. And I think that's an apt description. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.